Joy, lovely to see you as always. We haven't spoken for a while, so it's lovely to catch up with you. I wanted to kick off the interview with something that you said to me that I thought was a bit confusing at first, but then I realized it was quite a clever statement. You said to me, "Your problem is not the problem." What on earth do you mean by that, and why does it matter?
Well, what I mean by that is whenever someone has a problem or a perceived problem, so we have to be really honest here and say that not all problems are problems. In fact, most problems are opportunities. But the problem isn't actually the problem. The problem is you're thinking about the problem. And so if we change our perception about the problem, we can see it as an opportunity and we can see it as, a leapfrog moment, an opportunity to really um, for growth, to change or
Yeah,
to challenge our perceptions. So a lot of people walk around and they are a victim and they think everything's happening to them and woe is me.
yeah.
And really what I'm trying to introduce is this concept that it's not a problem. It's the way that you're thinking about it that's the problem.
Okay. So what you're saying, just to summarize that, what you're saying is that you want to change the way entrepreneurs think about building businesses. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I want to change definitely the way entrepreneurs build businesses, but also the way senior leaders lead their teams, the way CEOs and MDs make decisions. If you've got a person in a senior leadership position or an entrepreneur who is effectively in a senior leadership position, and they are seeing the problems as problems and they're not looking at the thinking behind the problem, then that thinking just trickles on down to everyone in the organization. So then you have a really big problem because everyone thinks there's a real problem when actually it can be solved with thinking. There's a famous story with Werner von Werner von Braun
Yep.
with NASA, and someone said to him that it wasn't possible to go through the Andromeda galaxy. Of course, my science language is very limited, but he basically said, then you don't have a place at NASA. If you think something's impossible, you can't work at NASA, right? So they get it, but the general public doesn't get it. That this idea that that the problem is actually an opportunity. And you look at Zappos and you look at EasyJet, and they had major problems to overcome early on in their business years, and they would have failed if they saw those as problems. But they looked at the opportunity and said, okay, we can't do this if this continues, but we can if we think differently. And they came up with really great solutions to solve really complex problems that would have otherwise put them out of business. And so, yeah, it's really about getting entrepreneurs to think differently. It's about getting senior leaders to think differently, and then recognizing that if they think differently, their whole team will think differently, and that changes the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about the importance of kind of mindset on numerous occasions in the past. What was it that kind of set you on this path? Because you've got another business, as it were, that is already successful that we've talked about in the past, which I think is a very cool little business actually. Well, it's quite a big business now, but what is it that set you on this path to do this kind of slightly different project?
Ironically, problems. So I had a lot of problems. My marriage was failing. That was a problem. My health was failing. That was a problem. I was trying to run this business that was failing. That was a problem. And so I felt very much 2019, 2020, 2021. I felt like there were a lot of problems in my life. And I went to Scotland. It's sort of a funny story. We used to live in Switzerland, and we had friends in Switzerland that wanted to come and stay in Oxford for Christmas. And so I said, sure, we'll do a house swap. We'll go to Switzerland. You come to England. And but what I didn't realize was that I was going to have to give up my passport in order to get my right to remain, visa to live here indefinitely, the indefinite leave to remain. Uh, and so anyway, so I had to message them and say, well, we can't come to Switzerland, but they'd already bought their tickets. They were on their way. So we had to figure out another place to go. And my husband loves Christmas at home. So he was very upset with me that I had booked Christmas away. Anyway, I mean, he was okay with going to Switzerland, but he was a bit upset about, this new situation that we were in. And so I'd always wanted to go to the Highlands in Scotland. So I booked a shepherd's cottage in the Highlands, just really thinking, let's just go do this. So we need some family healing time. His father had just died a few months earlier. There was a lot of tension in our house at the end of 2019. And so we go up to Scotland, and I was listening to this book. Now, the book itself is not a really good book, but what the book taught me I was training for a marathon, the London 2020 marathon. And so I was doing a lot of running. So I'm running through the Highlands, and I see, the most amazing sunrise, most amazing sunset. And I'm seeing, these stags and, it was unbelievably beautiful. And the book sort of opened up the idea to me that it's an inside out revolution. Like if you want the circumstances, situation, conditions on the outside to change, you've got to examine what's going on the inside, because basically what's going on the outside is a direct reflection of what's going on the inside. And that's what it was saying. And it was like, okay, so if I'm the problem, which up until that point, I didn't think I was the problem. I thought my husband was the problem. I thought the business was the problem. I thought everything else, I was the victim. I thought everything else was the problem. That set me on to a journey of how do I change the inside out? And that's when I got certified as a master neuro coach. I spent a year understanding how we can rewire the subconscious brain, and a lot of those thoughts that we pick up as we're growing up. And then I spent another 5 years, which I'm in my 5th year now, studying something called brave thinking, which is a totally different way of thinking, and helping other people to think that way too. So
And how did you go from I'm running in the Highlands and I've had this insight to I'm going to create this new business because you've got your quantum leap accelerator, which is a sort of really different approach to other ones that I've seen. How did you go from I've read the book to the accelerator? I mean, because that's quite a jump, isn't it, to turn this idea into a business?
yeah, it definitely was not a linear
No.
approach. It's a bit of like the squiggly approach, which I think a lot of people can relate to, particularly women, that squiggly career. It started with the book, and then I was like, okay, how do I do this? And then I found a coach. I got certified in a particular type of training, which is called brain priming, and that's to help people to rewire the subconscious. I was able to successfully do that for myself, and that's when my business basically 10x. We went from our first sale of, I think it was like 495 pounds, to 10 years later, 2.2 million pounds in sales. So, I used it to grow my business. I used it as an entrepreneur first. And then what I did was I brought it into the women that I was working with. So my other business is helping women return to work. And so, or change careers or start a business. And so it's very much working with women who are, it's a B2C business. It's working with women who have been home isolated, et cetera. And I started using it there, and we started getting incredible results, just amazing results there. And so then I thought, okay, if we're getting results there, and the investment is lower, and the stakes are lower. They weren't trying to build huge businesses. They weren't trying, these are women who wanted to generate 12 to 36,000 a year, which is very noble and awesome, especially if you've not been working and you've been looking after kids and that's what you want to do. But I thought, what would happen if we took this technology that I've learned, this mental technology, into the boardroom? What would happen if we took it into, the senior leadership team? What would happen if we started working with people who are really trying to build really, really big businesses, and have really big visions? And so, it took me a while to get to that point. I mean, to be honest, I think it helps that I've built a business that's turned over 2.2 million. It helps that I've, got 1,000 clients. It helps that I understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur if I'm going to go work with people, who are making big decisions, and, those sort of things. So it didn't come naturally. It was definitely not linear. But I just got to a point where I wanted to 10x my results. I've been doing this for a really long time, and I'm really good at it, and I love watching people get results, but I wanted to see what it would look like if we 10x'd it. And I read a really good book. This always comes back to books for me. I love books. I read about two to three to four, sometimes one book a week, but I definitely read two books on average per month. And one of the books that I read was 10x is easier than 2x. And I was really intrigued by it. And I guess part of my ADHD is that I also get obsessed about things. Well, that might be my autism that I haven't been diagnosed with, but I get really obsessed about something. So I've actually listened to the book 3 times,
Right.
and really got into this idea that actually 10x is easier than 2x. And so what would that look like if I were to take what I've been doing now, which is great and it works and we've stabilized and all that stuff, and actually roll it out on a 10x level, what would that look like? Well, it looks like working with senior leaders, and it looks like, taking this technology and seeing what we can do in the business, business environment, which, by the way, needs a lot of brave thinking right now,
Yeah.
because everyone in the business world is really, their perception is they're up against it because there's so much going on outside of their control. But that still goes back to the principle of it. If you think everything is outside of your control, then you have no control. And so that's why I really want to see what we can do in that space. So I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. So, and let me ask you, I mean, what do you see as the big challenges you're going to have to overcome to get to where you want to? In fact, I should ask a question before that. Where is it you want to get to with this business? Because I know you're relatively early stages with this new business. Where do you want to get to? What will success look like?
Yeah, I mean, I always have a goal whenever I start something or do something. Like when I started my first business, the first goal was to help 12 women. The second goal is to help 100 women. The third goal is to help 1,000 women. It took me 12 months to help the first 12 women. It took me 3 years to help the next 100 women. And it took me another 7 years to help 1,000 women. So each time I help more people, I cut down the amount of time it took me to get there. Yeah, this one is very similar. I want to help 100 business leaders, entrepreneurs, founders, MDs, CEOs, to basically have a quantum leap. My goal would be to do that in a 12-month period. And I've made it a 10x goal, right? So it's like 10x is easier than 2x. So, I basically 10x my initial goal with my previous business on this one. I've also 10x the price because, I'm working with people who have bigger stakes. They've got bigger visions. And so, it's that's also another thing that I'm doing. I'm going all in on 10x, and that's why it's a quantum leap, not just for me, but also for my
Yeah.
clients.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you see? I mean, it's one thing to say I'm going to 10x it. I mean, we've talked about this before. I love ambition. I mean, I think ambition is a really underrated thing. Really, you've got to have a bit of ambition in life, and you're not short of ambition, which is one of the things I've always liked about it. But it's one thing to say I want to 10x it. I mean, what do you perceive as the challenges that you're going to have to overcome? I mean, what are the obstacles that you're going to need to kind of work through to get to that goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think every time you set a goal, you do have to say, okay, what's going to stand in my way? Okay, one of the things I know is the people that I want to reach are not on Facebook and Instagram, they're on LinkedIn. And I've spent a decade learning how to use Facebook and Instagram very, very, very well. And I'm really good at that. And I'm really good at doing it with, paid
Yeah.
advertising, et cetera. This is a totally different kettle of fish. So I hired in a marketing team that does B2B, and they're much more versed at that than I am. And so I've been working with them on building a pipeline, so that I'm like basically doing what I do for my own business, but because I'm not familiar with the B2B market, they're helping me do it for that market. Can't say yet that it's been super successful, but I do have my first lead that came in this morning, which is very exciting. And I have
Wow.
my first sales call tomorrow. So, ask me tomorrow how it goes. So then I also had a client in my other business that needs to do a lot of work on LinkedIn. And I did some research and found like the number one person to learn from on LinkedIn about how to use LinkedIn. And he was launching a course in January. It was a 10-week course. It was a $5,000 investment. And I said to the client, look, I said, I think this is perfect for you. And she said, I'll buy it for you. You can apply it to my business. And I'm like, amazing, because I need to do it for her business, but then I can also do it for my business. And so I have been basically every single day for the last 5 weeks, 2 to 3 hours a day, I've been working on LinkedIn, completely rewriting my profile, completely revamping my content. In fact, yesterday was a big breakthrough for me because I finally was able to create content that leverages my knowledge but speaks to the right person, because I'm so used to speaking to someone else that I've not had that breakthrough in messaging. So I think the first thing that anyone needs to do when they're leaning into a big ambitious goal is to get really clear on the messaging. Like, who am I speaking to? What am I saying to them? And that's been the first thing. I probably started this journey much longer. I've been preparing for this journey for a while, but it's actually getting, okay, what do I need to do? I need to show up on LinkedIn every single day. I need to start speaking to my ICP, my ideal client profile. And so that's number one. And then the number two thing, which actually is pretty easy for me because I have the product already, it was just to repackage the product for the right ICP, the right audience. The package works in both audiences. So I just had to rename it, rebrand it, get a new logo. So that was actually a lot of work I did. My designer's on maternity leave, so she did a lot of that work before she went on maternity leave. So we had a good, nice deadline for that. So branding, messaging, product, those are three things that you need for any kind of a business launch. Then telling people about it.
Yeah, well, and let me ask you about something that interests me. So many years ago, I forget how long it was a few years ago, you put a lot of work with your last business into developing a set of values. And I remember us talking about them and you saying this has been a really important process for both you and for your team, right? And that, I mean, a number of people have said that to me, but that stuck in my mind about your development. Let me ask you, in what way have your values shaped the new business, the Accelerator? I mean, has there been a sort of a crossover or any? I mean, do you feel strongly about the same sorts of things? I mean, I mean, in what way are your values influencing the way you're building a new business?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two sets of values, right? You have your personal values and then your business values. And of course, the values that I had for my previous business were in the word sparkle. So supportive, positive, authentic relationships with women who are keen to learn and want to be empowered. I don't think that changes. I'm still working with women who are keen to learn and want to be empowered. Now, I have had some male clients, which has been really interesting. I've worked with an MD and I've worked with an entrepreneur, and it's been interesting to work with men and see some of the problems that they had and have, and a CEO as well of a very successful company. And they have really interesting challenges that women don't have necessarily, or they have a different version of the challenges. And so that would be the one thing that maybe has shifted a little bit. But Quantum Leap is, from a one-on-one perspective, I can do it with men or women, but from a group perspective, I'm still working towards working with women, because I see that there's a huge gap in leadership for women, and I want to close that gap, and I want to help women become better leaders. And yeah, actually, to be honest, women are great leaders. I want to help them get into those leadership roles to feel confident and deserving of those leadership roles. My personal values, they're like the 6 Fs, because my maiden name was Fahrenkrog. My married name is Foster. So F is just carries me around. So for me, mine were, still are, faith is number one, and family is number two. Finances is number three. I had a mentor who said to me, if finances aren't in your top three, it won't be on your radar. So now I decided I was going to put that into number three. And then I have fitness as my number four, and friends as my number five, and fun as my number six. And then I have two additional other ones, which are non-judgmental and open-minded. And, really, I think I bring all of those values, both the personal and the previous business ones, into Quantum Leap. I think as I get to know the people who sign up for Quantum Leap, and as we shape the team around them, we'll get more clarity on what the values are. But I think, one of the big values is I am more powerful than any situation, circumstance, or condition, right? This idea that I believe in people, we believe in people. Um,
Yeah.
so that's a value that I want to take very seriously, that, that everything that we do and we teach and we talk about is that you are more powerful than you believe you are. And, I'm going to believe in you when you don't believe in yourself. So belief is going to be a big value. Of course, being brave is a huge value for us. I have it on a sign in my office. To make big, bold, ambitious goals, you do have to be brave, and you have to trust that the universe has got your back, that it wants you to succeed, God, infinite intelligence, whatever you want to call it. And, and watch as miracles happen when you least expect them to.
Yeah. Let me ask you about something. I mean, we've known each other for a very long time, and one of the things I've always been hugely impressed about is your resilience. I mean, you've bounced back from all sorts of setbacks. Um, and what interests me, I mean, this may not be the case, but have you figured out a way to build in that resilience into your business? Because it comes from you personally. And, we were just talking about personal values and business values. I mean, one of the qualities I see in you is a tremendous resilience. Would you say that you've built that into your business? And if that's the case, how have you done it?
Well, every person on my team has done the program that I'm running in Quantum Leap, right? So I have made sure that everyone on my team has gone through the program, where, the Brave Thinking program, and they know how to think bravely. So I think that's really, really important, is that everyone around me thinks that way. There's no one that doesn't think that way. In fact, most of the people I hire are people that have already gone through our program, so I don't have to retrain. I don't have to retrain their mind.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I think the thing about resilience is it's a muscle, and you
yeah,
get put into situations that you have to pull yourself out of, literally, and that is where you build that muscle. And I think the problem is most people are very comfortable being comfortable, and they don't want to be uncomfortable. And I've set a lot of crazy goals in my life. I said I was going to go. I want my first goal, probably my first really ambitious goal, was to go to the Olympics, and I wasn't even like on the radar for the archery team. But I managed to somehow go from 44th in the country to 25th in the country to, fifth in the country. I even got a second and a third at the national championships. And so, I think the thing about a big goal, and I think I forgot this along the way a little bit, but the thing about a big goal is it pushes you massively out of your comfort zone. And by going for it, you learn so much about yourself. And, I worked for a really ambitious team doing their organic social media. This is one of our early clients. This was ages and ages ago. And I used to get really frustrated with them because they would set these huge ambitious goals, and every year we would fall short. And I finally said to them, look, stop setting these big ambitious goals, because it's so hard to get to the meeting and find out that we've all failed. And they didn't do a great job of explaining why they were setting them. Now I understand what they were setting them. And I just think it's, grit, which there's a book by Angela Duckworth about it. Her point is she rates effort greater than talent. Like, you could be the most talented person in the world, but if you don't put the effort in,
yeah.
someone who's got less talent and puts in more effort is going to pass you. And that is like the classic, hare and tortoise story. And you see it at the Olympics all the time. I mean, we're recording this during the Winter Olympics, and you see this all the time. We were watching the slalom yesterday. The number 2 girl going out of the gates straddled the gate, and she's out. It's over, and that changed the game. The girl who, we don't know who was going to get first, second, and third, but somebody got a medal that might not have got a medal, right?
Yeah.
Because they showed up and they did the work. And so, I really believe that, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, doing things that feel impossible, like we put our kids in. Now, this might be controversial, okay, because there's really great local schools where we live, but both of my children had specific talents that we felt were better suited in private schools. We had no idea how we were going to pay for it, right, when we signed them up, but we knew that that's where they needed to be individually, and that's proven to be true for them. They've needed the support that those schools have provided for them, and we didn't know how we were going to do it, and I'm still shocked that we've been able to do it. So there's and it hasn't come without challenges, and it hasn't come without help and support from people that love us, but but I think it would have been easy to just say, no, we can't afford it, so we're not going to do it. And I think that that's what a lot of people say to themselves. They just say, nope, but I can't afford it, I'm not going to do it. Or,
And
you
and let me ask you about that because I mean I talk to entrepreneurs all the time as you do. I mean it's a truism to say that building a business is like riding a roller coaster. There are great days, there are not so great days. What is it that gets you out of bed every day to keep kind of plugging away? Because you've been through some really difficult times, I know, because we've spoken about them. What is it that keeps you motivated to ride that roller coaster, if you like?
Well, a big part of the training that I had is to create a vision that's really crystal clear and to make it further than a year out. So when you're creating a vision, you're looking at 3 years from now, Your brain can't tell you it can't happen. I do a lot of, if money wasn't an issue, what would I do in this situation? If time wasn't an issue, what would I do in this situation? Like I do a lot of, let's take off the rail guards, let's take off the brakes and imagine. And I even do this with my clients. Like I still do some CMO work for a software company, and we were out on a 2-hour walk on Saturday, and we took off the guardrails and said, okay, if we had 250,000 to spend over the next 2 years on marketing, what would we spend it on? And we came up with all these great ideas and an idea that we never would have thought of if we hadn't taken the guardrails off. So I think a big part of dreaming big and taking action, big action, is to actually take off the constrictions and say, if there were no constraints, what would I do? Make that vision really clear. And so I have a very crystal clear vision in all 4 quadrants of my life. So my health and well-being, my love and relationships, my vocation and creative expression, and my time and money freedom. I know exactly what I want to happen in those. And I've written it down. I've got it recorded on my phone. I listen to it in the morning. I listen to it at night. And I'm fully invested in the vision. And because I do it first thing in the morning and last thing at night, when my brain is most plastic, that's also shaping my decisions and my motivations for the day. Like, so this morning, for example, like one of my things is I work out every day. It's just something that I do. Now we're on half term. I didn't really necessarily feel like working out this morning, and I'm in a WhatsApp group with other people. So I messaged them and I said, I'm gonna do a workout at 9. Anyone want to join me? No one responded. So I thought, I'll just go back to bed. And then I woke up at 9:50 or 8:58, and I was like, because I was like, all right, who's? And then someone had messaged to say they were ready for me and they were waiting, and I was like, I got to get out of bed. So I got dressed, did my workout, and I felt it was such a hard workout too, and I felt so good afterwards that I'd done it. So also don't try and do this thing alone. Bring people on the journey. I think they keep you motivated. And like we had a whole bunch of we've just cleared a whole bunch of loans and credit cards and all that stuff for my other business that I was working towards doing. That's in my vision, that I have 0 balances on credit, 0 balances on loan. And of course, when I did it, guess what I did? I messaged my partner in believing, another businesswoman who's really good with finances. And I'm like, look, I just wiped out all of these. I've just paid all these things off. And she was there to support me. So, making sure that you're sharing your vision with other people. You're so good because you always check in and you want to know how's it going? What's the progress? Like, making sure you're sharing the progress with other people and celebrating the wins. That's another thing. I celebrate the wins every single day. I have a notebook, and every day I write down 5 things that I'm grateful for before bed. I write 3 wins from the day. So I'm always looking for the wins from the day. There's always a win. Like, I got my workout in, that's a win. And then I predict my wins for tomorrow. So like, what am I going to do tomorrow? What's a win for tomorrow? So I don't have a lot of time to like wallow, or I'm always grateful, I'm always celebrating. And when you're in that vibration, it's a totally different vibration. So I don't have to do a lot of I don't have to motivate myself very much, but I do have people that help me when on the days that I don't feel like doing it, like this morning when I didn't want to work out.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly are motivated. That's for certain. Let me ask you about something you touched on earlier on about lots of business people feel there is an awful lot of uncertainty. I mean, Trump has changed the game in lots of ways in the US. There's lots of stuff. AI is changing the way lots of things work and so on. What's your take on dealing with uncertainty? I mean, your point earlier on was that people are feeling a bit beaten down at the moment because there is so much uncertainty around. I mean, what's your take on dealing with that uncertainty?
Well, the only thing certain apart from death and taxes is uncertainty. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's so interesting how certain uncertainty is. Like, there's always going to be periods of your life where things, are uncertain. I mean, my very, very close person to me who I love very, very deeply, who I thought was going to live to be 105, had a stroke right before Christmas. And it was such a shock to me because she's only in her 70s. And you think, like, this person's got another 30 years in your mind. And so I wasn't, that was a real shock to me. So I think the reality is that we just don't know what's coming around the corner. Like, as much as all of us would love to predict the future, I've got my beautiful vision, but here's the thing. My vision is more likely to come true no matter what the situation, circumstance, or condition is, because that's what I believe. And this goes back to your problem's not the problem, it's your thinking about the problem, right? So I can still believe in what I want to create, even if the things around me are changing, because that's what I'm laser focused on, and I'll find a way to do it, and I think that I think that that is what's important to understand is you can let the circumstances, situation, conditions dictate what you do, or you can dictate what you're going to do despite the situation, circumstances, and conditions. And I think the reality is every decade we're going to be up against it for something, right? And I know I just heard someone really, really intelligent talking about he hates when people say that the AI revolution is like the new industrial revolution. He's like, it's not. It's like a billion times more powerful. And I get what he's saying. And, in war, he was talking about the fact that there's more countries arming up now than there has been in any point in history, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty, but you can't spend your time focused on it because it will destroy you. And I think, we have this really clever part of our brain called the reticular activating system. And when we get focused on whatever's happening, the uncertainty or the certainty of our vision, whatever it is, it will go laser on it. So that's why when you go, I want to get a new puppy, all of a sudden you see that puppy everywhere. Or you want to get a new car and you know what color it is, you see that color car everywhere or that style everywhere. And when I was trying to get pregnant, guess what I saw everywhere? Pregnant ladies. Guess what I don't see anymore? Pregnant ladies. I don't want to get pregnant again. So the point being that your brain will go to work on whatever you focus on. And so one
So
of my
focus on
rules,
the right things.
yeah, one of my rules is no news. And it doesn't mean I'm not informed. I still listen to like this podcast with someone that I highly respect who's extremely intelligent. I love listening to him talk about stuff that's going on, but I'm not going to wake up in the morning and listen to the news. And I'm not going to go to bed at night listening to the news. I will hear what's important to hear because people around me are going to be talking about it. But I'm not going to dedicate hours of my life to focusing on something I have no control over, whereas I can focus on the things that I do have control over. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let me ask you about that though. I mean, it's so one of the things that's interesting about building a business, if you like, in the digital age, is that you can, there are huge opportunities. I mean, you can work with clients, in South America if you want, can't you? I mean, you can work anywhere online, and that's the upside. And it's a fabulous upside for countries like ours that are relatively well equipped and have got the technology and all the rest of it. The downside is that you also then are up against global competition. I mean, you might have a relatively small business, 10, 20, 30, 40 people, but you're competing in a global market potentially. Well, certainly in an English speaking market, if you don't speak any other languages. What's your take on how you kind of make the most of the opportunities whilst dealing with the inevitable kind of competition in that environment?
Yeah, I mean, the global market so much better than I do. I mean, I find it ironic that I'm an American selling to a British market. I don't really sell to any other market.
You could,
What's that yet?
but you
Um,
could.
yeah, I could. I could definitely. I think, I buy a lot of products from the US and I do a lot of calls in the evening because I'm on coaching calls with American companies, where I'm the client, in that sense. But I think I do find it interesting. I mean, I've been out of America since 2008. So and in between 2008 and 2026, I've only gone to America a handful of times, and I've probably spent less than three months there, probably, or maybe less than 6 months there. So it is interesting to me in some ways where I don't feel like I'm the biggest English speaking market really is the American market. And then you've got, the Canadian market as well, and the Australian and New Zealand market, which in coaching, you can go across all of
Yeah,
those.
yeah,
A lot of people do very successfully. I have focused on the British market, because that's where I'm located. That's where that's what I know. And, I would see that in longer term, we would be expanding beyond those borders. But so I don't have those same problems probably that other people do. I will say I have tried to launch in the US market. I tried to launch my other business in the US market twice, and we failed both times. So, I just got to the point where I was like, actually, right now, that's not the priority. I'm going to refocus on what I know works, and I'll keep doing that. And then we'll think about expanding again later when we're in a better financial position. But I think, this is always where working with someone who knows the markets and understands how to break into a market. Partnerships are really, really useful. I mean, a lot of like, there's big star power in the US. So if you can get star power behind you, that would make a big difference. Same thing here. Like I have a friend who went on Davina McCall's podcast and it got 1 million views, and her whole sphere changed in terms of like the following that she got, and the number of people that she got, and thousands of people were interested in her after that. So I think there's a strategy in aligning with other organizations that are already in those countries, and there's also strategy aligning with star power where you can build
Yeah.
up those relationships.
Yeah, yeah. And let me ask you, I mean, you've been on a bit of a journey because we've talked about those things along the way. Would you say there have been any particular critical moments that have shaped the way you've developed as a CEO?
Oh yeah, lots of them. I mean,
What would the big ones be? What would the big ones be? The ones that
well, on a personal level, in 2019, on Thanksgiving Day, my husband said he wanted a divorce. And a big part of the reason he wanted that was because I was working all the time and I wasn't around. And at that time, we weren't even making money. It was like, I mean, I was working all the time because I was trying desperately to make money. And I think that was really hard. I had to change the way that I ran my business so that I could be more available to my family. Because one of the goals that I set out for myself was that 10 years after I started my business, I wanted to still be married. I wanted to still know my kids, and I wanted to still have a business going. And I was only 4 years into that goal when that happened. And so, I had to really dig deep and say, no, no, I do want to stay married, and this matters to me. So that was the first thing. I think the second thing was in 2021, we lost all the cash in the business overnight. This is my other business. And I had investors saying, let's just shut the business down, cut our losses. And,
I
you
remember
know, yeah. And that was huge because I had gone to a weekend training event where I had learned about brave thinking and thinking differently. And I came back from that and I was really convinced that I could turn things around and that we could make this company much better than what it was. We could dig ourselves out of the hole, which we did. I had to completely change my advisory team. I had to basically step away from the advisory team, and I had to basically say, I'm going to go this alone. I had one person that came with me from that group of people. And, 4 years later, we completely stabilized the business and it's still going. And it's in a really good, strong place. With 197 subscriptions monthly and 1,000 clients and all those things. So I think if I think about like a personal thing that really jarred me, and then the second thing was the business, and then I'd say probably in 2023, recognizing that I had potentially had ADHD, and then also hitting perimenopause. I think those things were quite major because it starts to affect the way that menopause has a massive impact on your brain as a woman and cognitive function, but also like just being able to get a good night's sleep because you're waking up drenched in sweat, and and then other things like can't have sex with your husband, and there's all sorts of things that people don't talk about. And I was having all sorts of problems that I had to also navigate from a health perspective. And then my mom died in 2020. My biological mom died in 2024. Like there's never not gonna there's never not something that you're dealing with. So
yeah.
it's just like you just deal with it. But for me, I have this saying that I blossom where I'm planted. And so whatever happens to me, I'll take the good from it. I'll be grateful for what came out of it, and will share my experience so that I can help other people. And that's what I do literally for a living. It's quite fun.
And given what you've just said, let me ask you one last question. So, if you were going to start this, or if you met somebody, a rookie CEO, somebody who's about to start a similar journey to yours, what would be the one single most important piece of advice you'd offer them?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. Think bravely, act boldly. You really have to have a vision and you have to take action towards that vision every day. And it's going to be uncomfortable, but it will be the best roller coaster ride you've ever gone on.
Yeah, wise words. Joy, as always, it's fabulous to see you. Thanks for making time to come on the podcast and tell us about the journey that you've been on, and good luck with this new business going forward. I mean, I have a horrible feeling it's going to be a huge success, so I look forward to hearing about it. All right, I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Cheers, Joy. Bye bye.